She has no name in the Bible. She gets exactly one sentence, one moment, one decision, and that one moment turned her into one of the most haunting images in all of Scripture. A woman frozen in place, transformed into a pillar of salt, staring back at the city she couldn't let go of. For thousands of years, people have read this story and asked the same questions. Was it literal? Is there a geological explanation? Have archaeologists actually found her? And what does modern science say about a region where entire cities could be erased overnight and human bodies preserved in salt? But underneath all of those questions is a deeper one. The one the Bible is actually asking. Why did she look back? And what does it cost you when you can't let go of what God told you to leave behind? Today we go deep into Genesis 19, the archaeology, the geology, the history, and the theology of one of the most mysterious and most misunderstood moments in the entire Old Testament. Stay with me. To understand what happened to Lot's wife, you need to understand where she lived. Sodom, a city so defined by its wickedness that its name became a permanent word in human language. But here's what most people don't realize. Sodom was not a small village. It was part of what Genesis 13 calls the cities of the plain, a cluster of 5 prosperous cities in the Jordan Valley: Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. The text describes the region before its destruction as being like the garden of the Lord, well-watered, fertile, extraordinarily rich. These were not primitive settlements. They were thriving urban centers in one of the most agriculturally productive regions of the ancient Near East, and they were obliterated. Genesis 19:24 and 25 describe what happened in terms that are both brief and catastrophic. The Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. Out of the heavens, every living thing in the cities was destroyed. Every person, every plant, the entire plain, everything. The Hebrew word used for the destruction, hapak, means to overturn, to completely overthrow. It's the same word used elsewhere to describe something being turned completely upside down and inside out. Total annihilation. And somewhere in the middle of that catastrophe, a woman stopped and looked back and became salt. Before we get to the science and the archaeology, let's spend a moment on the person herself, because she deserves more than one sentence. Lot's wife had lived in Sodom. The text in Genesis makes clear that Lot and his family were established there. He sat in the gate of the city, which in the ancient world meant he was a man of status, a city elder, someone with roots and influence. His daughters were engaged to men of Sodom. This family was not passing through. They were home, and in the middle of the night, 2 angels showed up and told them to run. Don't stop, don't look back, don't pause anywhere in the plain, run to the mountains, and don't look behind you. Genesis 19:16 records something heartbreaking. When the morning came and the angels urged Lot to hurry, he hesitated. The text says the angels grabbed him and his wife and his daughters by the hand, physically pulled them out of the city, but while it's because the Lord was merciful to them, they were dragged out of the life they knew. And then she looked back. The Hebrew verb used, nabat, doesn't just mean a casual glance. It means to look intently, to fix your gaze, to stare with focused attention. This was not an accidental peek over the shoulder. This was a deliberate, sustained look back at everything she was leaving behind, and she became a pillar of salt. Now let's talk about what science and archaeology actually have to say about this, because this is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. The region where Sodom and Gomorrah are believed to have existed is the southern end of the Dead Sea, one of the most geologically unusual places on the entire planet. The Dead Sea sits at the lowest point on the surface of the Earth, roughly 430 meters below sea level, and the region is saturated with salt, sulfur, bitumen, and highly flammable natural gases. Ancient sources, including the 1st century Jewish historian Josephus, describe seeing the remains of the destroyed cities in his own time. He writes that the region still bore the marks of divine fire. The Greek geographer Strabo, writing in the 1st century BC, also describes the area around the Dead Sea as containing evidence of catastrophic destruction, burned landscapes, ruined cities, the smell of sulfur. In 2018, archaeologist Dr. Stephen Collins and a team from Trinity Southwest University published findings from a site called el-Hammam in Jordan, located exactly where Genesis places the cities of the plain. What they found was extraordinary. The site showed evidence of a massive instantaneous destruction event approximately 3,600 years ago. Pottery was found with its outer surface vitrified, meaning it had been exposed to temperatures so extreme that the surface melted into glass. Mudbricks had been vaporized. Human skeletal remains showed signs of extreme heat exposure. The destruction layer was distinct, sudden, and unlike anything a conventional military attack or fire would produce. The research team proposed that the most likely cause was a cosmic airburst event, similar to the Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908, where a meteorite or comet fragment exploded in the atmosphere and flattened over 2,000 square kilometers of forest without even touching the ground. An airburst over the Jordan Valley would produce exactly the kind of sudden, total, multi-directional destruction that Genesis describes. Fire coming down from the sky, destroying everything simultaneously. Burning sulfur raining from the heavens, that's not poetry. That may be the most accurate description an ancient eyewitness could give of a cosmic airburst, igniting the natural sulfur deposits that saturate that entire region. But what about the salt? What about Lot's wife specifically? The area around the Dead Sea contains one of the largest salt formations in the world. Mount Sodom, Har Sodom in Hebrew, on the southwestern shore of the Dead Sea, is a mountain made almost entirely of halite, which is rock salt. It is approximately 10 kilometers long and 100 meters high, and it is riddled with salt pillars and columns formed by erosion, human-shaped formations that have been noted by travelers for thousands of years. Josephus, writing in the 1st century AD, claims he personally saw the pillar of salt that was Lot's wife. He describes it as still standing in his time. The early church father Clement of Rome, writing around 96 AD, also references her pillar as a known landmark. Today, a salt pillar on Mount Sodom is locally known as Lot's wife. It is approximately 40 feet tall, roughly human in shape, and has been a tourist site in modern Israel for decades. Now, is that the actual pillar? Almost certainly not in the literal sense. Salt formations erode and reform constantly. What we're seeing today is not the same geological feature from 3,600 years ago, but the geography tells us something important. In a region where salt formations that look like human figures naturally occur, and where a catastrophic event of extreme heat and pressure could have encased or preserved a human body in the salt-rich soil, the account in Genesis is not geologically absurd. It is, in fact, entirely consistent with what we know about that specific landscape. But here's where I want to spend the most time, because the geology is fascinating, but the theology is what the text is actually about. Jesus himself references Lot's wife in Luke 17:32. 3 words, the shortest verse in the Gospel of Luke. Remember Lot's wife. He says this in the middle of a passage about the end times, about the sudden, unexpected arrival of judgment and the necessity of complete, irreversible departure from what is being destroyed. He doesn't explain her. He doesn't analyze her. He just says, remember her. That means Jesus considered her story so self-explanatory, so universally understood that 3 words were enough. So what is it we're supposed to remember? The rabbinical tradition offers something worth considering here. The Midrash, ancient Jewish commentary on the Torah, suggests that Lot's wife looked back because her heart was still in Sodom. Her married daughters were there. Her social world was there. Everything she had built and valued and identified with was there. She wasn't curious about the destruction. She was grieving what she was losing, and that distinction matters enormously. There is a difference between leaving a place and actually leaving it, between walking away physically and releasing it internally. She left Sodom with her feet. She never left it with her heart. And the moment she looked back, the moment she turned toward what God had said to abandon, she was frozen there, permanently fixed at the exact point of her divided loyalty. The pillar of salt is not just a miracle, it's a portrait of a person caught permanently between two worlds, belonging fully to neither, and the salt itself carries meaning that a first-century reader would have felt immediately. In the ancient Near East, salt was used to consecrate covenants. The Bible references the covenant of salt in Numbers 18 and 2 Chronicles 13. Salt was permanent, preserving, and incorruptible, but salt was also used to render land completely barren. Judges 9:45 records Abimelech sowing Shechem with salt after destroying it as an act of total, permanent desolation. Salt preserves and salt destroys. Lot's wife was preserved in the most literal sense, frozen, unchanging, a permanent monument at the edge of a destroyed world she couldn't release. There is something profoundly sad about that image. She escaped the fire, she physically got out, but she never fully left, and so she stands there like on the boundary between salvation and destruction, as a warning to everyone who comes after her. She has no name in the Bible, but Jesus said to remember her. That tells you everything about how seriously God takes the moment when someone who has been called to move forward stops and looks back and chooses the familiar destruction over the uncertain salvation. The science tells us the destruction of Sodom was real. The geology tells us salt pillars in that region are real. The archaeology tells us a city was obliterated there in a way that matches the biblical account with remarkable precision. But the story of Lot's wife is not really about geology. It's about the posture of the heart in the middle of a moment that demands everything. God told her to go and not look back. He gave her a way out of a city that was already dead, and she couldn't do it. The question Genesis 19 leaves hanging in the air, the same question Jesus points back to in Luke 17, is a simple one. What are you still looking back at? If this video made you see this story differently than you ever have before, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. These are the layers hiding inside Scripture that most people never slow down enough to find. Subscribe to Hidden Mysteries of the Bible. We go deep every single week. I'll see you in the next one.